¡Ahí viene la migra!
Muy buenos días, good morning y bienvenido a su programa Trucha Time. Yo soy Carlos Spector, abogado de migración, trayéndole su programa Trucha Time. Hemos creado este programa para ponerlos truchas con los cambios en la ley de migración. Hay muchos cambios. A partir del principios de diciembre empezamos este programa para darnos cuenta de qué está pasando en nuestra comunidad, cómo están afectando a los niños de DACA y qué es lo que podemos hacer. And it is also the only truly bilingual immigrant rights program in the country. And today, as always, I'm going to begin with an analysis of the two bills that are pending before Congress to try to take up the slack on DACA. Thereafter, we'll begin a conversation with a special guest, Susie Byrd, long-time immigrant rights activist here in El Paso, and a school board member of the El Paso Independent School District that has engaged in a truly, I believe, heroic and brave effort to push the El Paso School District in a progressive direction, supporting DACA, and she's here to tell us all about that and the hopes that we have for other school districts engaging in that. Entonces, la pregunta principalmente para muchos de ustedes que son DACA es ¿qué pasa cuando llega trompetas? What happens when President Trump hits the street running? He's already told us that he's going to revoke DACA. And we need to listen to Trump. We need to hear Trump, and we need to believe Trump. Everybody believes he's going to soften up. Everybody believes it can't be as bad as it is. But I'm here to tell you, after 25 years of practicing immigration law and being involved in the immigrant rights movement, it's as bad as it's ever been, but it can get worse. So the question becomes on an individual basis for the DACA kids. What do I do on January 20th when they revoke my work permit, or is it going to last until it expires? What happens if my work permit expires in 2018 and Trump with a signature, with a stroke of a pen, revokes DACA? Remember, DACA is an executive action that is intended to expand executive power for the protection of 750,000 kids who came here through no fault of their own. We've had guests on this program to tell us about their plight. We may have one also appearing to add to our perspective. But there are two bills. The first question you need to ask is, what's Plan B when they take my card away? And we've laid out a couple of legal strategies, and we've talked to various groups about this. Then the second question becomes, what are they going to replace it with? Well, there's two bills that were introduced at the end of the last session that appears to be coming up again in January. That was on December 9th, and one was what's called the Bridge Act, which is Bar Removal of Immigrants Who Dream and Grow the Economy Act. And this essentially is a bill designed to codify or make into law the executive DACA action, which means that you would, if you were DACA eligible, even if you didn't apply, you'd be eligible to get a 3-year work authorization or provisional status. And of course, if you have no criminal history, if you finished high school, you're studying high school, and have lived here before 2007. Now, that's nice and dandy. That's what Senator Graham, Durbin, and others have supported. What are the chances of that passing? I don't think I don't think it's very good chances. But there's a bill that accompanies it, which is called the SAFE Act, which is Securing Active Enforcement Act, sponsored by Senator Blake. And this is a very typical immigration bill in Congress, which intends to give with one hand and take away with a shovel. And what that means is that we're following the old amnesty playbook, which was in order to get people amnesty, we're going to give maybe 2-3 million people their papers, but then we're going to impose prohibitive or restrictive immigration bills, which was the employer sanctions that last forever. And we're so desperate that it appears, and many times it really is in a realistic sense, a very positive thing for a part of the community. And here we have the old amnesty bill coming up again, and that's called the SAFE Act. And it's always very, very cynically posed, the Securing Active and Fair Enforcement Act. And what it does is it holds the kids hostage because it does everything that the Bridge Act would do, which is 3-year provisional status. If you qualify, you've been a good boy or girl, but then it gives $100 million additionally for enforcement. It creates mandatory detention for all interior enforcement throughout the country with all immigrants, which means if you've been arrested, if you have committed an offense, not convicted, then you would be subject to mandatory detention, which means you're not eligible for a bill and you need to stay locked up until they finish it. What else are they going to do? They're going to hire over 100 new ICE trial attorneys, prosecutors, and they're going to hire over a couple of hundred temporary judges within 14 days. So the vetting of these judges are going to be individuals who are clearly close to the Trump administration. And then the other thing they're going to do is that they're going to mandate that the judges finish the cases in 90 days, which is a violation of due process. This has to do with the judge's docket. And so there's a series of bills that are being proposed, and my sense is that the Bridge Act, which gives just benefits, is not going to pass without something that really gives the Trump administration and the Republican anti-immigrant wing a basis to continue turning the screws against the community. And so that's why we've created Trucha Time, because it's time to become Trucha, time for you to understand the nuts and bolts of this, because repression takes on the form of law. And therefore we must follow the rule of law, which means to screw our fellow human beings in this country of ours. And so that's an overview. 577-0750, 577-0750, si quieren hablar, si quieren comunicar o expresar su opinión. But prior to that, we have, as I indicated, a special guest who is responding to these anti-immigrant proposals throughout the country in the way that we can, because the fight becomes local. We, as a community, have to do what we can do. Congressman O'Rourke has done his part by holding his town hall meetings and supporting these bills, these progressive bills that help our community. And Susie Byrd, who's a member of the El Paso Independent School District, has engaged and is engaging in a series of proposals, specifically a board resolution that recently was passed that I'm very proud of and very happy with. And therefore, welcome my dear friend Susie Byrd to the program to tell us about that. But before that, Susie Byrd, a mí me gusta chismear. And so we're going to talk a little about you. Tell us who you are and how you got involved in the immigrant rights movement, because you have an interesting history.
Sure. So I grew up here in El Paso, Texas. Got here when I was in second grade. And, boy, how did I get involved in I think to live here and to be part of the community, to recognize that many of the people who are your friends, who you've grown up with, that are part of your life, that have created, helped create the community that you love, it really is to, I think, be mobilized to that really, I think, is what creates the mobilization in this community that supports immigrants. I mean, I think any of the proposals that are on the table right now really in many ways feel like an attempt to undermine what I think makes El Paso a great city, a city where everybody feels welcome. And so that's really probably how I got started when I ran for office. I think one of the things that you recognize being a city representative and now a school board representative, that you have to be involved in the conversation about many of these federal policies because they will so dramatically impact our community. And so when I was on the city council, I worked very closely with the Border Network for Human Rights, simply just trying to lay out what we know are the values of this community to both state and federal legislators, always very concerned about the trade-off that too many people seem willing to make when it comes to comprehensive immigration reform, which is let's trade the border, more enforcement, that has in many cases been harmful to our community in order to get comprehensive immigration reform. We never get the comprehensive immigration reform. We always seem to get the enforcement. So I think that's been the way I've been involved.
Now you were a city council person
for 8 years.
For 8 years, what years?
2005 to 2013.
Okay, and then now you're on the school board.
School board from 2013. I was not, because we had the board of managers, and we weren't seated until 2015. So I've been kind of active, actually allowed to sit for about a year and a half now.
Great. Tell us, well, one of the things I think that's interesting is that I remember in the 80s, during the period of time of the first amnesty bill, at that point I was the national chair of the Immigration LULAC Task Force, and first the Texas chair. And when I was the chair of the Texas LULAC Immigration Task Force, one of the things that we did during the immigration debate, and everybody should remember, but ought to remember or learn, that for the immigration bill to pass, the amnesty bill in 1986, November 6th of 86, it began in 1971 with an employer sanctions bill by Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And that was in 71, and it almost took 25 years. And this is the point of this is that persistence to either move or attack changes that are not helpful take time, and sometimes we lose so many battles that it appears that we're just running in place. Right. And so one of the things I learned back there was that it took 25 years to get employer sanctions through, from 71 to 86. And most of the resistance was coming from the local communities. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and I was so proud, I was living in Houston at the time, that we were able at that point to coordinate 4 city council resolutions against employer sanctions simultaneously. And it was El Paso was one of the first ones. That was back in the 80s. And so there's a long history of city councils being involved in local affairs. And then I think the city of El Paso was the first to do it, and then we went to San Antonio, Houston, and I believe Laredo. And so there is a long history of utilizing local school boards, the local city council, county commissioners, who are plugged into the community for things that advance part of the community. Because if you advance part of the community, you're advancing the whole community. Right. And I think that's what we've seen with the DACA stuff. Now, in terms of leading up to what you're doing now with the school board, what were the lessons that you learned as a city council person in terms of what were the limits of what one can do, even if it is symbolic only, right, with the city council? What's happening there? So, it's frustrating because obviously you don't have the levers of power in order to make some of the changes that you'd like. So, you weigh in with a resolution, which then, your lobbyist and your delegation can rely on to take to the state and to the federal level. You go knock on people's doors at the state and federal level. You're only a voice in that. Unfortunately, you don't
so that is kind of disheartening in some ways. But I think one of the things that we learned on City Council is not weighing in, not kind of giving into fear, like what happens if we do this, how will the state respond, how will the federal government respond. Not doing that really, I think, does a disservice to your community, because we need for decisions in Austin, we need for decisions in Washington, D.C. to be made listening to the voices of those who will be directly impacted by those laws. And so it's really important, I think, that you have local entities weigh in. And I think more, I've been thinking about this a lot, given the change in administration and sort of the radical difference this could mean for our community. We have city school board races coming up in May. We have mayor and city council races coming up in May. I think that as a community, we really need to demand of any folks sort of taking, putting in their name for those seats, to really say, we want to know what your plan is for local governance, but we also want to know what you're going to do to protect and weigh in on these very important state and federal issues that will dramatically impact our community.
Now, currently in City Council, there has been, in the very recent past, efforts by the Border Network and its supporters, an attempt to get a city ID passed. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that? Why hasn't that passed?
And I think it is.
First of all, what is that?
So a municipal ID would be a locally issued ID that would authenticate your residency within the city and authenticate who you are, that you are who you say you are, without sort of weighing in on the issue of your nationality. And it would be a really useful card for people right now who don't have access to IDs, to state issued IDs, because they're not here legally,
or they're homeless,
or they're homeless, or many reasons why people don't have those IDs. And so for at the local level, at the school board level, it's really important. For example, when you come to pick up your child, he's sick, she's sick, or you just want to come onto the campus, we ask for your ID. We ask for lots of different ways you can provide that. It doesn't have to be a state issued ID, but certainly having that ID locally would, for people just coming to pick up their kids, even just trying to get a library card, really simple things that you and I take for granted, opening a bank account, that would really provide a lot of access in the community. And so my sense from having watched the project unroll and watched the Border Network, I feel like there's a lot of support for it locally. But one of the things that I think City Council has unfortunately taken to heart is that they feel like pursuing this there would be repercussions from the state in doing that. And I think that's been one of the arguments that the city manager has put forward. Unfortunately, I think one of the reasons why the city council has chosen not to pursue it, that and costs. So I think costs are another part of the equation. But I do think in a lot of these conversations, local communities are often silenced by the threat of how the state will view an action like that, or how the federal government will view an action like that.
Are there any other cities in the state of Texas that have a municipal ID?
I think that Austin might have something similar to that. I can't remember who else. I know it's been most successful in New York City. I've looked at kind of what they've done there, and I think simply because they've made it more than just an ID for those that can't use don't have access to an ID, although it helps those folks the most. But they've really opened it up for many other city services. It's almost like a point of pride. I want to have my New York city ID. San Francisco, I think, has a very successful program. I think Oakland has a successful program. But I think it would be a really important and necessary tool. I hope the city council will pursue it. I think, though, given sort of lots of other priorities and the kind of a lack of focus on that, it doesn't look likely that they will.
Now, in the entire period of time that you've been involved in electoral politics, have you ever seen a single immigrant or immigration issue that or stance that has caused anyone an election? That became so hot that it became the burning issue.
No, not really. I mean, you know, I have, you know, just from taking the stances that and it's like on any number of issues. One of the things that I've learned, you know, if you can stand in front of a group of your neighbors or voters or people that, you know, supported you and spell out why you feel like that's important. And you're also really good on constituent things. If you're returning people's calls, you're answering their questions. People, even if they don't support your take on that one issue, I think by and large, you know, would support you again, even if they don't agree with you on that one issue. But I think one of the important things is you've got to, every vote you take, you have to be willing to stand in front of, and you know, and anybody that's asked for that and explain why you did it. And I think, you know, I've taken some votes that have certainly caused a lot of frustration or anger in the community, but I've been willing to get in front of folks and say, this is why I did it. This is why it's important.
Very good. 5770750, 5770750. If you have any questions for Susie Byrd or any questions in general here at Trucha Time, we're willing to take your calls. Estamos hablando con Susie Byrd, un líder comunitaria, miembro de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar del Paso, hablando del papel del político local en la cuestión de migración. Más allá hablaremos de esto aparte de este programa, para traerles este programa en español, pero hoy, como este programa es grabado y lo estamos pasando streamlining on Trucha Time por todos lados del país, creo que es importante llevar a cabo esta conversación completamente, inicialmente en inglés, y en otros días también lo podemos hacer completamente en español. Explicaré un poco más allá de qué se trata eso. Pero mientras tanto, si hay alguna inquietud, 577-0750, y a lo que te truje. Susie, we're here to, first of all, lay out a context for what's happening legislatively and politically in our country in terms of the mass demonization, the mass deportation, the mass registration and mass demonization of entire class of people, and the efforts of local peoples, local communities, and local governmental entities of what they have done, what can be done, and what is being done. And so, to that end, Susie, let's get to the heart, and one of the main reasons that we invited you was not only to celebrate what the El Paso Independent School District has done collectively, but also what you and other leaders have done individually in, again, making El Paso a leader, not just in El Paso, Texas, but throughout the Southwest. So let's talk about this great article that appeared in the Sunday El Paso Times, which says El Paso Independent School District declares support for undocumented students. What did you do? Why and how?
Sure. So we want to first give kudos and thank Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who drafted this resolution, and I believe sent it to all of the school boards in the region, asking for their support. This is a really important resolution, and really, I think it's a response to the election and the rhetoric of the incoming president, and wanting to make it clear to the students in our classrooms that we stand with them regardless of their status, that we support them, and that we look to the federal government for solutions to protect their presence in our community. We know being a community of immigrants, that there's great value and strength in that, and we want the federal government to recognize that and find a way forward for these students in particular, but for communities like ours, where so many productive citizens of our community are without a proper status here in our community.
Now, the intent. What was it? How would you entitle the resolution?
You know, I don't remember the title. It doesn't have a title, but it was essentially to say that we recognize that there's been a lot of benefit to students with President Obama's providing this status, this DACA status, which gave Dreamers the ability to come out from the shadows, identify themselves to the federal government, and then essentially live without fear of being deported. And we know that fear really undermines their ability to, sort of breathe a sigh of relief and really get on with the business of getting educated, going and finding a job. And so we know that there's been a lot of value in our community from DACA, and we wanted to make sure that the incoming president knew that and urge support for those dreamers and urge support for comprehensive immigration reform.
Now, one of the things that the resolution does is clearly support undocumented kids. Number one, the Supreme Court many years ago in Doe versus Plyler has mandated that kids who live in the district or resident of the school district have to go to school.
Right.
And the parents can be held in contempt of court and or charged criminally for supporting truancy. So to go to school, it's a must.
Right.
And so your effort is really not in violation of any law, but in furtherance of the law in terms of taking care of what you're doing. What I found interesting in terms of where the criticism is coming from is that the article says very correctly that under federal law, public school districts are required to educate all students regardless of immigration status of them or their parents, but schools are prohibited from releasing certain information about students without the permission of the student and or their guardians. And so at this point, it appears that the specific suggestions or support that the resolution pushes doesn't encourage the violation of any law,
right,
but really a compliance with the law.
Right.
In
Right.
terms of revealing that. Now, one of the things it said is, one of the things I believe that this resolution, well, let me ask you, when did this resolution pass?
Just a couple, right before the holidays, we met on December 20th.
Okay, and what was the nature of the opposition, or was there a?
We had no public opposition. There was some questions from the board. It was supported unanimously, but kind of to that question that I talked about earlier is sort of, we apparently are the only school district in Texas as of at this point who has passed such a resolution. So we're kind of standing by our own on this. And does that, make us a target of the state or a target of the federal government for doing that? It may very well do that, but I think it's important to stand with our community regardless. I think if you looked at this last election, this presidential election, you had thousands of more people voting in this election that have ever voted before. I think that was in large part in defense of our community, recognizing that the rhetoric put forward by the incoming president would be very harmful to our community if enacted. And so I think our community said very loudly and very clearly in this election that this was not something that they would tolerate. And I think it's standing with our community. And I think probably more so than anything, one of the things that's important to me about this is we want those students and those families that we know are living in fear, have a lot of anxiety about what this election could mean for themselves. We wanted them to know that we're with them, that we stand with them, that we recognize that we have an obligation to provide them a quality education, that we're committed to doing that, but that we're also, as leaders in this community, want them to know that we'll do what we can to protect them.
Now, in light of this, in terms, I think one of the biggest concerns voiced by some of the school board members and others is that there is a bill pending again, pursued and supported by Governor Abbott, that wants to punish cities that support sanctuary, it appears to me, policies, not just become a sanctuary city. They seem to be defining very, very broadly what sanctuary means,
Right.
to the point that it may mean loving thy neighbor.
Right.
You know, it may be, we're going to punish the city if you love thy neighbor. And so what role has the school board taken, either collectively or individually, in terms of testifying or opposing any policies at the state level, like last legislative session, to defund cities that oppose immigration law enforcement? And then how do you oppose immigration law enforcement?
Right. So, when I was on the city council, we took a very active role in this, along with our police chief and our sheriff. One of the sort of the big triggers, I think, for folks that are against sanctuary cities is they don't like the fact that communities like ours have said very clearly and very strongly that we are safe because we're not enforcing immigration law. That's not our job. Our focus is on keeping our community safe. Forcing us to enforce immigration law takes us away from that core mission, and then also diminishes the trust between our law enforcement and immigrant communities. People that might be willing to come forward to report actual criminal activity might be less willing to do that if they feel like they would be deported as a result of that. And so that has been a really important thing for the city. I think it will continue to be an important thing for this community. And some of our best speakers on that have always been law enforcement. When Sheriff Wiles, I think, has been a really, because it coming from somebody who essentially has authority over, is the highest law enforcement official in a community that's one of the safest in the country, saying, you know what, this would not make us safe for make us enforce immigration law. And so that really has been one of the big issues. We don't see as much on the school district side, but I think we need to all be mindful of that, because even if our school district police were asked to enforce immigration law, that just really takes away from what the core mission is, which is to keep our community safe. So we need to be very alert to that. We need to send our best folks out to speak to those issues. And I have always found that our law enforcement officials really are the best speakers on that issue, because they're the experts, and they certainly have a lot to tell, because we are such a safe community.
One of the interesting things about having this program is that most of its focus has been the DACA kids. Most of the guests have been DACA kids and leaders. Most of it has been in English, and some in Spanish, some in Pocho. But it's been interesting to listen. It's important to listen to the kids. And one of the things that struck me was the fact that we've had many high school kids come on board, and there is no "I don't have papeles" club, which kind of answers the question why there isn't.
Right.
Because nobody wants to go around and say, "I don't have papeles, let's join a club."
Right.
Well, to begin with, bullying is at its apex in terms of your life, and there has been no organized effort, and there's not been a real big organized effort at UTEP too. But I think that the town hall meeting that Congressman O'Rourke had a month or so ago, which I was happy to attend, opened up that door.
Right.
And kids are starting to talk out publicly. And kids are starting to mobilize just a little more, because to begin with, it's different. Now it's over. We have a situation where it's almost like freeing a slave and then recapturing him. Mm-hmm. You've been out of the shadows, and now you're forced to go under the shadows.
Right.
But you've seen and felt the sunshine and its heat, its warmth and its promises. And many of the kids are still at a loss as to what do I do individually? Mm-hmm. What do I do legally? I mean, if they come for me at the house, if they pick me up, do I have a defense? Who do I call? And politically. And so I think that what this program is doing and what your efforts are doing in terms of the El Paso Independent School District, saying we are welcoming. Our students are, first of all, students. Mm-hmm. Thereafter, what is none of our concern. We're not going to allow law enforcement to come in violation of the law without a warrant. But being now an educator, a school board member, that is, I think, a difficult task to advertise in school or anywhere else that if you're DACA or if you're undocumented or having any other types of problems at school because of your immigration status, contact who?
Right. You know, usually where we do find that out is when a student, which this is why something like this is really important, is when a student really trusts somebody at the school, a teacher, a counselor, a principal, and they're struggling because of that they're willing to come forward. And I think that sort of building the confidence in the school system for those students is really important to me. One of the things I'm most excited about that the school district has done over the last several years is to institute essentially as our default program for students that are learning Spanish, and then inviting anybody in, learning English, and then inviting in anybody that wants to learn Spanish, is a district-wide rollout of our dual language program, which does something really fundamental to me that I think is very important. Is it values both languages equally, and so it says, it's just important for us that you learn English as that you become more proficient in your native language, which is Spanish. You're going to do better if you do that. And then it also invites English speakers to learn Spanish, and because everybody's going to be better off if they know two languages. But it's also done something really important in our schools, which it has because we're essentially, kids are learning two separate languages side by side. They're in mixed classrooms, where before they were in isolated classrooms. Many of these newcomers to our schools were, in sort of bilingual classrooms. They were just Spanish speakers. They were isolated within the context and the culture of the schools. They're now very much, they're teachers of a second language to their English-speaking friends, but they're not isolated as much as they were under sort of the old bilingual ed program, and we want to continue to do that. And I think what that says to kids at the campus level, both Spanish speakers and non-Spanish speakers, is that everybody belongs here and everybody is bringing something of value. And I think it's developed a lot of pride with our immigrant students, who I think before were very isolated on our campuses. So I think sort of in this resolution, but I think so much of what we're doing really in our classrooms is integrating those students in a way where I think they've built a lot more pride and confidence in themselves, and when they have pride and confidence in themselves, they're going to reach out more to their teachers and counselors and principals when they find that they're stuck.
Excellent, tremendous. Let's go to our commercial break and we'll return.
Todos los lunes, miércoles y viernes a las 11 de la mañana, escucha el programa Trucha Time, conducido por el licenciado especialista en casos de inmigración, Carlos Spector. Conozca los cambios que hará Trump y los derechos que usted y su familia tienen, y hay que estar preparado. Recuerde, lunes, miércoles y viernes a las 11 de la mañana.
Soy el abogado Carlos Spector. Los espero para darles información que necesitan cuando llegue Trump. Es Trucha Time. Preparados, no escamados. Escamados, scared but prepared. We have a call, una llamadita. Adelante.
Hi, good morning. My name is Rick. I'm a resident of the East Side, and I'm definitely intrigued with the commentary on air. I just have a general question for both Mr. Spector and Ms. Byrd. Specifically, I'm concerned about kind of the legal relativist perspective here, that I generally consider myself to be pretty liberal. However, some of the El Paso Independent School District's position seems to be that we'll either pick and choose what type of laws benefit us, and if we don't support that position, then we'll actually either ignore or actively promote against a particular policy. So my question is, even though I agree with the result here, do you think that it actually creates a dangerous precedent for picking and choosing different laws in the future?
Right. I would just like to make it really clear that we always follow the law and want to make sure that everybody within the organization follows the law. However, we as a local governing body, I think, have a responsibility to weigh in on those laws that we feel don't honor our students, that don't help our students succeed. And we have, as school boards before us, have always weighed in on both state and federal law that we feel need change, that we need different laws. So it's a matter of sort of adding your local voice to the state and federal conversations. In this particular regard, though, we wanted to specifically support President Obama's work with the Dreamers to protect them, to give them a legal avenue to come out from behind the shadows, and we are very much responding to the Trump administration's rhetoric, sort of hinting at getting rid of these protections and wanting to say, you know what, we believe these are important protections for these students. We'd like you to continue them, and then also to consider comprehensive immigration reform that would help people that are here in the states illegally, but acting in ways that are productive for our community to stay.
Thank you for your call. No, I think, well, let's go to the next call, and then we'll amplify on that. Yes, welcome to Trucha Time.
Yes.
Adelante.
Yes, hello?
Hello.
Yes, I first of all, I wanted to congratulate Susie, Byrd.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, first of all, I want to congratulate Susie, Byrd, and the El Paso Independent School District for having passed that resolution. My question is, how does that filter down, the support filter down where the teachers and the counselors and school, principals, the whole school system understands that and is working towards that?
I think that's a really important question. I think one of the things that I've been, I learned a lot about at City Council and now on the school district, which is actually a much larger organization than the city, is it's one thing to do a resolution or provide policy guidance at the governing level, but really it doesn't have much impact unless it filters down within the organization. And so our principles are one of the primary ways that we really rely on the organization to get that message down, to hold those values that up to light for the campus, for the teachers, for the counselors, and then really to be in charge of making sure that the values and policies are followed. And so it takes a lot of work to do that. We're not always successful, but some of our best folks that kind of help us with that are, parents and students that find some problems at the local campus level that then, reach out to central office, reach out to school board members and say, you know what, you guys said this, but what's happening in the classroom is different. And so we really expect you to help us rectify that. And so a lot of the work that we do as school board members is helping also just to make sure that the values and policy of the board find their way into the classroom.
Thank you for your call. Very, very good calls. One of the things that I think is supportive of what you said is in the article that appeared in the Sunday Times, which I suggest everybody read it. It's a long article, very detailed, lays out the debate around what constitutes a sanctuary city, what constitutes a sanctuary campus, and who may be at risk. We have to clarify that there is yet no definition of what all that means, because we haven't seen the actual proposals in writing by Governor Abbott at this point. But one of the things that the school district has already clarified, and I think it answers in response to both questions, is that the El Paso Community College spokesperson declined to say whether officials had even discussed the sanctuary campuses, but did say that they continue to have a commitment to educating all students and responding to all law enforcement requests in compliance with state and federal law. There is no overt disobedience, not even civil or otherwise, of any law. Everything I think that the school board has done is in furtherance of the law. Now they have discretion. Do we allow someone into, well, they may not even have discretion to allow someone in and talk to the kids or start looking through their records. So they're defending the kids and the school district in the context of the law. So I don't think it's legally relative. There's no relativism here in terms of picking and choosing laws, because you're complying with the law. At this point, you're not advocating anything other than dignity, respect of students who are pursuant to the Supreme Court authorized and mandated to receive an education. So I think that's one of the, this conversation has been very helpful for me, Susie, too, since I'm not an educator, is that this does filter, creates a context, right, a feeling that it's okay, and that we don't have to be hidden. And then the second call, which spoke to the second call, which I thought was very perceptive, is that how is it implemented?
Right.
And I think you answered that very, very well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that that I also saw in the article and have been following over the years is the settlement in the El Paso School District over the cheating scandals, and one aspect of it involved the channeling immigrant students into programs for specific purposes, to hide failing grades or scores, and that caught my attention because I represent Mexicanos en Exilio, which is an organization of Mexicans in exile seeking asylum. Mm-hmm. And many of these kids, if not all of them that we represent, around 200 families, come with kids. Not since the Mexican Revolution have we seen entire families come. Up until recently, maybe 2007, 2008, generally it was the economic migration. And now it's political. Right. Especially 100,000 people from Chihuahua and the east side of El Paso has really caused the city to flourish, but at the same time has brought additional responsibilities and or burdens to the school district. And one of the problems we had, and I'm talking about kids witnessing, rapes in the family, disappearances of mom and dad, just horrible kind of ISIS type of stuff, beheadings. Then they're in school.
Right. Oh, yeah.
They're in school, and there are no programs for them. Many of the kids that we have in school, and many of them are in the Isleta Independent School District, have witnessed all kinds of horrors that creates horrible lifelong trauma, which is never treated. And so we've had complaints from the parents that says our kids were brilliant, they were smart over there, and now they can't pay attention in school, and they're being sent to the principal's office or punished because they're falling asleep or because they're not responsive. They're traumatized.
Right.
And so we did have meetings with school board members. We did have meetings with principals and started talking about this trauma, and they shut it down. One of the principals that did allow us to speak, actually it was the vice principal, was scolded by the principal of organizing the parents to talk about the trauma. And so that's been a real difficult thing to address. Now, and I invite you to listen. This Friday we have Las Hermanitas Alvarados, who are from El Ejido Benito Juarez in Chihuahua, who in 2009, and tomorrow is the anniversary of her mother's disappearance by the military, were forced to flee, and they ended up in school, and they had to stay there till they were 20, 21 because they want an education. You know, and it was important for them to do that. But one of them was defined as, or channeled to special ed. The other one had to take classes all over again, all kinds of mismanagement. Is that the type of program or problem that was addressed in this lawsuit in terms of the cheating scandal?
Sure. So it wasn't necessarily a lawsuit. It was just a bunch of folks that are going to jail. I think there was some. And one of the things that I think it highlighted for me, which I think it has made dual language such an appropriate response in many ways, is that you had an administration at that point who was essentially financially incentivized to get great test scores. And he recognized that there were many students in our system, because we had done a poor job by those students, because we hadn't provided the quality of education that we could get, that there was some students standing in the way of him getting the incentives that he wanted, the financial incentives that he wanted. So they simply chose a path of hiding those students. Some kids that were in 9th grade, skipping them to 11th grade so they didn't have to take some of the high stakes tests that come in 10th grade. Some kids were forced out, essentially encouraged to go to other districts, encouraged to go to charter schools, encouraged to drop out, things that to me are an absolute dereliction of our obligation to provide a quality education. And unfortunately, many of those students, because we had were immigrant students or Spanish-speaking students, we had at that time a really poor bilingual education program that did not provide great results for those students. They were barely learning English. They were not getting much support in their native language. And then, essentially kids that have a poor program like that without a support in their native language we tend to lose those kids about 5th grade. Not, they don't all drop out, but they tend to become, at risk. They have a very hard time. They fall behind academically. They fall behind in the classroom. And so really, I think one of the things that I learned from that, and I think we've taken a lot of time and effort to refocus the organization around that, is we had a bilingual ed program that simply was failing our students. And that sort of the consequence of that is this thug superintendent, these students stood in the way of his bonus at the end of the year, and so they became targets of his cheating scandal. And so we have revamped that program. I think the one place where we still are not doing as well as we could is those students that have been either with us for a long time, since kindergarten, and they've really have not picked up the second language, and now they're in middle school and high school, or those students that are new to us in middle school and high school. So they're coming to us needing to learn English, but also sometimes with some not a really strong academic background. And so we're really working on strengthening our programs for our English language learners, both in the middle school and high school levels, but we have a lot of work to do in that regard. And then the other thing that we've tried to do is really to de-emphasize high-stakes testing as the sort of be-all, end-all. I think what had happened, unfortunately, to that organization, and it really harmed those students in particular, but I think really was harmful to all of the students in our classrooms, was when you make whether or not you pass or fail on these high stakes tests, which you just pay, you just take once a year, sort of essentially how everybody is measured, from the student to the teacher to the school, you really get a lot of things that are very harmful. So the worst of that was the cheating scandal, but I think we have lots of policies in place that I think supported this notion, and sort of another consequence of that was the students that really need the most help, the most support, nobody wants them. The principal doesn't want them, the teacher doesn't want them, because they reflect poorly on them. But those are the kids that most need help and support, and those are the kids that we really are obligated to provide the most support for. And so we're really trying to it's a huge cultural shift. We talked earlier about how you get everybody sort of on the same page, walking away from the high stakes testing, walking towards a better form of education for our Spanish speaking students. That it's going to be a decade's worth of work to
but
really
still having to comply with existing law.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of work. So, but we're very mindful of that. I think what that cheating scandal did was make us aware of really systematic failures within our schools that needed to be addressed.
That's and again, getting back to the symbolism of the resolution, because many times people over the years have lambasted efforts of activists to get the county commissioner's court or the city council involved in something not within their jurisdiction. And I think this is a very, very specific and perfect example of how this opens up one's heart and mind and resources to individuals struggling, rather than seeing them as a burden.
Right.
At most, it's a challenge.
Right.
And what it should be is a labor of love, of understanding who these kids are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's if you don't deal with the issue of immigration in school, you'll never deal with it, because this is a permanent issue in El Paso.
Right.
That's what makes us who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, I want to salute your efforts over the years, and specifically in this resolution. And I hope that the Isleta School Board, the Socorro Independent School District, take a good look at this. And I think you've inspired me, because we have a lot of kids in Socorro, to organize our people to that end. We've always wanted to do something with the kids, and we're following very closely the cheating scandal, but I hope it takes less than a criminal prosecution.
Right.
Exactly. To open up a school board.
Right. And I think one of the things that one of the things that probably every educator knows, working with students, is that kind of to your earlier point about kids coming to school with trauma, is that there's a lot of students that enter their classroom that simply are not prepared to learn that day, because economic instability at home, they didn't get enough to eat, they didn't get enough sleep, they have trauma. And really, I think part of what we need to do as a sort of a system of schools is figure out how to resource our schools so that they are prepared to more adequately serve those students, because a teacher can't really be the end all and be all for that, can't solve all of those problems. One of the things that we're doing at several of our schools, Guillen, Zavala, and Hart Elementary, is called community schools. And it really invites community organizations to partner with schools to provide the resources for students who aren't coming prepared to learn because of things outside of the school day. And so hopefully that might be a good model for other campuses to look at. And some of that's social work services, counseling for students with trauma. But we know that we can't provide all those resources, but we know that there's a lot of organizations in the community that can. Essentially, community schools helps mobilize those resources in a way that best serves that student, so that student can learn.
That's great, because you mentioned one of those schools, and it happened in one of those schools where we were invited by the vice principal to talk about the trauma and tell them, you need to look out for these things. Just horrible stories. And she was scolded by the principal not to do it. And it's refreshing to learn that there is an opportunity and a venue and an organization to do it. Because if we would have known community organization existed, we would have gone to them, or at least to the coordinators of those programs, and say, you may or may not know this, right, but this community is flooded with trauma victims. Right. And most of them are kids, and most of them cannot perform if, in fact, that's not dealt with in terms of either knowing that the school counselors are available to speak with. But I'll
get with you so we can make sure to make that connection. Bowie High School is also a part of that. That was the other school.
Great. That's a great place for us to start. Well, Susie Byrd, thank you for flying in.
Sure.
Resting your your wings on our perch, and bestowing upon us the benefit of your knowledge and your passion. I want to invite everybody Friday to come listen to a new program, which I think is going to be a permanent feature, which is going to be La Hora de los Desaparecidos. There is over 100,000 disappeared in Mexico, and many of them are here in El Paso. Half of the disappeared in Mexico are in the northern borders, and most of them are here along the border. The children that helped start this movement are las hermanitas Alvarado, who graduated from Riverside. One of them is still there. Her aunt, La Güera, Maria, is one of the leaders of this movement that began the movement of the disappeared in 2008, and it's now flourished over the country. They're part of Mexicanos en Exilio, and they're here to talk about their plight and to remember her mother that was disappeared, I believe, tomorrow. We'll have the program on Friday. There'll be a community-wide celebration of their efforts to find their mother. They haven't relinquished that hope, and we hope to begin this conversation tying in the human rights organizations in Mexico. But where the issue of school reform and Mexican exiles comes together is in the plight of the children fleeing the violence in Mexico. Yeah. And we hope to be part of the solution rather than the problem, and invite everybody. Acuérdense que el viernes vamos a tener las hermanitas Alvarado. Iniciaron o ayudaron a iniciar el movimiento de los desaparecidos en México. Ya llegó el momento de reconocer una tragedia, un genocidio que existe en México, y empezar a analizar esa situación y tratar de presentar soluciones viables para nuestra comunidad. Como siempre, yo soy Carlos Spector. This has been Trucha Time. Hasta la próxima.
All right.
Keep this movement going. Keep this movement rolling. In spite of the difficulties, and we're going to have a few more difficulties, keep climbing. Keep moving. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving.
El siguiente es un programa pagado. Esta estación no endosa ningún producto o servicio que se anuncie durante esta transmisión. Posturas y opiniones expresadas durante este programa no necesariamente reflejan los de esta estación, sugerencia o personal. 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 Personal.